Well, welcome. Welcome to the Humanities and Social Sciences Literature Review Workshop. My name is Erin. I'm in person in the library, and this is a HighFlex workshop, so anyone who's in person or online, welcome. I use she, her pronouns, and today we'll be going over literature review strategies, kind of an overview, and also talking about different tools and resources that you can use as you're working on literature reviews. So the session is being recorded right now. I will be sharing out the slides and the recording after the session. Just know that if the screen is small, if you're on WebEx, there's an option to kind of zoom in and out. There's a little plus or minus sign on your screen, or should be. That can sometimes help with the viewing quality. And then if you are in person, you can, just share any questions you might have. Or if you're online, feel free to put questions in the chat, or you can unmute and just share. That's also welcome. I would love to get a sense of who is in the workshop today. So I would if you could just share your program or department, just so I have a sense, that would be great. You can just type it in the chat. It might be easy if you're online. While you're doing that, just again to introduce myself, I work here at UMBC. There's 6 reference librarians, and we all have different subject departments and subject areas. So if you take a look at our list, most departments, in fact, all the major departments are covered on campus. I work with a lot of the humanities, some social sciences departments. So I work with English, history, I work with the language, literacy and culture program, modern languages and linguistics. But I have other colleagues that work in other areas. So we, have most of the areas covered at UMBC. You can always reach out to me because I presented this workshop if you have a specific question, or if you'd like to reach out to your subject librarian. This gives you a list of the majors on campus, our names, and our contact information. Awesome, and I'm seeing some folks in the chat. Let me put my email in the chat as well. I have a UMBC email. Ignore the slide there. edurham@umbc.edu. So it looks like this is great. So the MPP program, that's great, wonderful. Honors thesis, yes, that makes sense for literature review. Aging services, fantastic. And first year in the management of aging services, wonderful. Well, welcome. Looks like there's a couple of you in aging services. And I believe your subject librarian would be Katie Sullivan. She's fantastic. So again, you can always look at your program and who's in charge of that. Well, welcome everyone today. So we'll just talk a little bit about the main purpose of a lit review, and then kind of talk about some of the organizing strategies and some tools you could use. Ultimately, a literature review allows you to get an understanding of the research that has already been done. So the goal is to analyze and synthesize the conversations that are happening. It can be helpful to identify if there's gaps or areas that have not been researched. That will allow you to then make an argument for why your research is valuable. If there is a gap, you can talk about what you're contributing. You can also kind of get a sense of how the research and how the conversation has changed over time. That can be really helpful. And ultimately, the focus is to show that you're aware of the scholarship, and you're then able to position your research as being very relevant. So it's a discussion of previous research that's been done. It's a critique, perhaps, of some of that research or some of the methodologies that were used. And it's an evaluation of the scholarship there. Welcome. To show where your research fits in that context. Remind me what program you're in. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, great. We have like 10 folks online and then, so welcome.
Okay.
We're just talking about literature reviews. We'll go over these in more detail. But thinking about broadly, you're going to be exploring topics. You'll be identifying a research question. Then the real search starts. You'll be reading and skimming and taking notes. You'll want to try to have some sort of organizing strategy. And then the writing process. So that's a whole process in and of itself, outlining and drafting, and then editing that. So if you're working on a literature review for an assignment, maybe it's for ultimately your dissertation here at UMBC, you'll want to work closely with your professor or your mentor just to make sure that you have some guidance, clear scope and focus as you're doing your literature review. And obviously, it's not necessarily linear exactly, right? It can be iterative. You can kind of go back as you're writing or as you're evaluating. You might realize maybe you missed something and you might do some additional searching. That's totally normal. You know, doing research is very cyclical. I always find it helpful to look at some concrete examples. So we're going to pull in an article, a peer-reviewed article, and a dissertation. So let's first look at an article. So articles tend to have, you know, roughly 20 pages, you know, 10 to 25 pages of an article. This is published in an academic peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Human Behavior in the Social Environment. And this is focused on language brokering and how that works in families. So this is kind of about bilingual kids who are in a family and how they often serve as the go-between. So this is the academic article. Generally in an academic article, you're going to have the abstract, which explains what the whole article is about. And then you might have a section that is titled Literature Review, or you may not. In this case, it just says Introduction. But I can tell it is reviewing, the author is using that introduction to review the literature. I should say the authors. Looks like there's 4 different authors. So the authors are using the introduction section to talk about the scholarship already that's been done. And you can see that because of all the citations. So actually just looking at this, they've divided up the literature review in a couple sections and they've titled them. So you might see this as well. It might not be called literature review, but if they're discussing the literature, it's a literature review. It even says the literature on culture brokering, and then it kind of talks about that. It talks about more recent literature, and then it gives citations. It talks about how some of the terminology has differed. So and then it even identifies groups and categories. So there's some literature on Hispanic or Latinx. There's literature on Israeli. There's literature on German, right? So it kind of breaks it down that way. So as you read this introduction, it's providing a roadmap of the other scholarship that's already been done. You can see all the different citations. So this whole introduction section is a massive literature review about these different areas. I kind of like this example because it does break it down into different themes or topics. Language brokering, language brokers, right? But it's all the literature review. And then you get into the actual article itself over here. So it might say it's a literature review, or it just might start discussing the literature review. That's an example there. Let's also look at a dissertation. I know a number of you are probably working towards a dissertation or a thesis. So this is coming from our dissertation and thesis database. This is someone who's studying second language teaching and teaching using culturally responsive pedagogy. I think this was for, so it's a doctorate degree in curriculum and instruction. So kind of an education PhD degree. So if we scroll down, I want to just show the title, the table of contents. So sometimes, and often actually, I would say for dissertations, there is a chapter that is specifically devoted to the literature because it is such an important part of your dissertation. You are presenting your research, but you're showing how it fits within all the research that's come before. So it's a huge part of your dissertation. In this case, it does have a chapter called the literature review. But what I liked about this example, why I pulled it in, is because it breaks it down. So there's 4 pages on the theoretical framework. There's a number of pages on culturally responsive pedagogy, right? So there's a whole literature review on that, and there's all these subtopics. So that takes up about 20 pages. Then there's the lit review on critical reflection, because that's a big part of the dissertation. So there's, about 15 pages on that. And then there's a section of the literature review that's teacher identity and agency. And there's another 15 pages there, or actually a little bit more, like 25 pages on that. You don't have to do it this way, but I like this as an example to show that because dissertations often are talking about a very, very narrow focus, one way is to even think about your literature review in different buckets or thematic areas. Because this is your dissertation on teaching second language and promoting culturally responsive pedagogy, it makes sense that this person, this author, divided it up. So they have their literature review. Some of it focuses on the culturally responsive pedagogy, some it's on critical reflection, and some it's on teacher identity and agency. And ultimately, this is going to be something that you end up deciding yourself. As you're reading the literature, you might start to come up with categories or different areas that are really important to your argument, to your thesis, to your dissertation. And so you would then organize it that way. There's no right or wrong here. It's just organizing it in a way that makes sense and provides the information. Yeah. No, you're fine. Totally fine.
How can you ensure that you've covered all the literature within a topic?
In some ways, you just need to be having close conversations with your mentors. That is different for every subject area and every topic potentially. You do want to do a pretty thorough job if you're writing a dissertation. If it's something, an assignment or a narrative assignment, probably the page limit might limit you, right? You have 20 pages. Something you can think about, though, is trying to get to a point where you've identified a lot of the same names that keep coming up. Or if you have some important articles that maybe your professor has even pointed out, you can look at their footnotes or their bibliographies and start to kind of see what scholars are being mentioned a lot and kind of make your decision there. You can also have your own scope, right? That it's the sense of like, you're going to spend X amount of time and you're going to search these databases and you're going to search these topics. And then you are able to bound it a little bit that way. So there's not one answer for that. Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges I would actually say about writing a literature review, is deciding when you're done. Yeah.
I was told like to look at papers that have like review papers, but
oh yeah,
you can't really find your review papers with all the things that I'm looking for, and
yeah,
I don't know, I'm just having a hard time with that. So.
Yeah, so one thing to consider, because your topic might be the only one that kind of combines those different areas, if that makes sense. So then I would do a literature review actually very similar to this, where there might be one area that you kind of do a deep dive and see what the literature is on that. And then you, same thing with the other area, and then you're combining them in your own research. So that's something that's very common actually. Yeah, good question. Any other questions online? Anything there? So we kind of looked at a couple examples. I liked those examples because they kind of outline very clearly the different themes that they're focused on. That's something you can think about as you're thinking about your own literature review. And again, this kind of goes back to the sense of it should be conversational in the sense that you're just highlighting what other scholars have said. You're presenting that, and then you're also making an argument in a way as to why your research is needed and important. And then you're sharing that, you're setting it up in the literature review, and then you're then presenting your research for the rest of your paper or your dissertation. So it kind of allows the readers to see why your research matters, how it fits in with what's been done in the past. Oh yeah, I do kind of like this analogy. I don't know, it works for some people. The idea that, you know, you've entered a parlor, you've come late, and when you arrive, others have been there for a while and they're already talking. So you listen, and then you decided you kind of have something to say. So you present your ideas, someone answers, you answer, someone comes to your defense, and then the hour grows late and you have to leave, you know, the dinner party. So you leave and the discussion is still going on. Just kind of a little thought as to how it is with the conversation analogy. These are graphics I cannot take credit for. Some of these come from like Derek Musgrove in the history department, but I like the idea of thinking a little visually about a literature review. So you have your overall topic, but then there's little subcategories, right? And these might become more evident as you are reading the literature and you can start to identify them. What I like about this graphic too is that it's porous, right? There might be a little bit of overlap between categories, and that's totally normal. There's also the buckets, right? So you might have all the papers in one bucket, like this is focused on this area. And then you're starting to group things by topic or by theme. That can be a nice way to think about a lit review. And basically, this is how not to write your review. You do not want to just have all summary. This author says this author says that, this author says that. That is not useful at all. You really want to have your literature review. You want the authors to be discussing together. You want to be synthesizing them and evaluating them. And you can even be critical of some of the arguments that have been made, right? Because you're trying to present how your research stands out, or critical in the sense of just evaluating, kind of having a conversation about the literature review. So it should be synthesis, it should be evaluation. Analysis is important, critique is important, not just a very dull list off of all the authors. You do not want to do that. Are there any questions so far? Just give it a couple seconds if anyone's typing. And there'll be time at the end also to ask questions. We'll go on for now, but if I see anything in the chat, I will pause and address whatever comes in. Let's talk about some practical strategies. So we'll go a little bit more in depth in the steps. We'll talk about some organizing tools, and then we'll do some searching. So I would actually say the most important thing is to discuss with your advisor or a mentor or your faculty, especially as you're in the process of identifying a research topic, because this can change, right, during your program, especially if you have a whole year or multiple years, if you're working on a dissertation. And this is also helpful for bounding your research. There was the question about how do I know when I'm done, right? So this can be also helpful as you have a conversation. You can start to maybe identify specific keywords. So you're going to do a search on anything that has that particular keyword, potentially. You can also select specific databases. So instead of just searching all databases everywhere, you could select databases that are targeted to your major or your program. That can also help you narrow a bit, and it will be more relevant, I guess. So if you're presenting on aging studies, you would just focus then on those databases and those scholars that are in your field. Now, some people want a more interdisciplinary approach, and in that case, it would be more helpful to use many different kinds of databases from all different subject areas. So you just kind of have to have a conversation about that, and how far you want to go afield. Yeah, question.
For you have like a topic and you find that there's like an article on it, and then you look at the articles then you look at articles that cite that article that you found. Do you think like once you get to, I don't know, I think I'm just like trying to get all the articles and like trying to figure out all the ways to get all the articles. So like
it can be overwhelming, right?
Yeah. So like beyond that and beyond like having subtopics, because there's so many different keywords you can have.
Yes, yes.
Like I just know I'm trying to figure out how I can find all these articles on my topic.
Yeah, you could be a little more picky, right? You could start to be a little more picky and say, that's fine, that's sort of relevant to that, maybe that one aspect of my topic, but I really do want to see if there's any scholars who are focused on a couple of these, right? So that's one way. You could just start to be a little more picky and just make that evident. Also depends on what kind of literature review you're doing. So if the assignment is to do a rigorous systematic review, then you just want to be, and that means like you have a very clear system and process, and you have identified the exact databases, the exact keywords, and then the goal is to truly find every single article. Yeah. But then people can winnow it down by reading the abstracts from there and deciding based on the abstract if it's actually useful. So you can still make your decisions as to what you're going to include in your systematic review, but you just have to do it systematically and be very clear about what you're including and not including. Now, other types of literature reviews, like just a narrative literature review, which is more general, you're just trying to get a sense of what's been written, you have a little more leeway. And so it's kind of the sense that you're going to read and search until you have enough to really talk about and discuss. You feel like you've reached all the main scholars. You're not seeing any like really important articles continuing up. There's still going to be articles that come up on your search, but that you feel like you have what you need to really do a nice discussion about that, then you can kind of make a decision. Can also kind of be bounded by your time. You only have X number of weeks to do your search, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, there's not, sadly, it's so ambiguous, right? It's kind of, you have to just get a sense for yourself what you're going to use as your boundaries. Yeah. As you're finding literature, you might want to have a plan for if you're going to do a quick skim that day, or if you want to do searches in the next hour or so, and then you have a plan to make sure you're reading. Because I would say where I get caught is just in how long it takes to skim through things and take quick notes. So make a plan for yourself. Some people do like a brief reading log where they just write a sentence or two about it. That can be really helpful. And just as you're reading, you want to, again, try to synthesize or read critically. So you want to get a sense of, are there any arguments in the literature? Are there scholars who really disagree? That would be helpful to talk about in your own literature review. Any conflicting theories or methodologies, or if there's scholars that keep coming up that you're like, oh, this person is cited quite a bit. Lots of the articles I've read cite this person or cite this study. Make sure that you go to that study and you read that study. So for note taking, some people like a chart, or some people even just pull up a Google sheet and they have different columns, or a Google Doc with a table. Sometimes it's helpful to get the very, very basic information. Again, don't spend a ton of time here, but it's trying to distinguish in a nutshell what's important about that article, what you want to remember about. Honestly, I've seen people do highlighting or color coding system. Like this is second tier, like this is sort of tangentially related, but it's not core to my literature review. So you might highlight in red the ones that are really important, and then like orange for things that are less so, or whatever color coding system you want. Another thing you could do is log, especially if you're doing a systematic review where you need to be very specific and state all the steps you do. You'd want to log your searches, log what search terms you use and the databases you search. So that's especially if you're being systematic about it. And whatever works for you. I mean, Post-it notes can be great. Color coding by topic. You can do this online. There's some softwares. I'll mention a couple ideas, or just physically lay it out, whatever works for you. It's helpful to find common themes or things. Again, you're trying to find parts of the literature, the discussion that's happening that will be relevant to you and your research. That's really the goal. So find patterns or themes or common findings or discussions or arguments. That's really helpful. And hopefully, I mean, you already have your topic in mind, you have your research questions in mind, but as you're doing the literature review, you might refine it a little bit, depending on if you identify any gaps in the literature, or if there's something that you're like, oh, I have to address this in my research now. So that may slightly change. And then the writing process. So I won't go into depth here, but just know that it can be helpful to outline, to think about your themes and the categories, how you're going to have a discussion in your literature review, and have enough time to review and edit. So some organizing tools. There are some note-taking apps like Evernote I've used before. Simple Note, there's Bear, there's others. This is not a comprehensive list in any sense. Evernote will allow you to upload like PDFs or images, and you can kind of, if you like handwritten notes, that's one way you can kind of organize them all in one place by uploading them to Evernote. Again, a lot of these have like a free version, but then the most powerful options come in the premium, which is a charge. So something to be aware of. Planning and project management, there's always tons of apps. Todoist is a pretty popular one for a lot of options for checklists and things like that. Asana, Trello, again, those might be helpful. The old-fashioned pen and paper with a mind map, just trying to outline what's coming up. I personally find it really helpful after I've like taken notes on 5 to 10 papers to kind of pause and just try. I have like a piece of paper, like a physical piece of paper, where I have some different categories mapped out, and I try to identify where do those fit? Like, do they fit in different categories? Do I need a new category? Or I have a pretty good sense after reading a number of papers at once, 5 to 10 in a batch, like what is actually really key to my argument? What do I really want to focus on? And what's kind of on the side or kind of a lesser one? So that's another idea too. So do a batch of reading, do a batch of notes, and then do the next 5 to 10, right? And kind of organize it that way. There's also citation management tools, and that's a workshop in and of itself. We do offer one on Zotero. My colleague's offering one on EndNote on October 1st. There's a recording of the Zotero workshop that was given last week. There's a tool called Obsidian that a lot of scholars like. That's, again, citation management organizing. I personally have never tried it, so I can't speak to it myself. But there's a lot out there. And ask around in your grad classes, ask your professors what they like. There are so many more than just this. Anyone have something they like or a tool, feel free to put it in the chat or talk about it. It's a good place to just share with fellow grad students. Yeah. Yeah, I know, right?
I think I waited too long to.
That's okay. You can always go back, like if you have your paper saved, you can always go back and kind of create a folder system for yourself. Or if you're reviewing things, you could then just take some very fast notes and kind of get caught up. So think about, and also it's important if you've been doing research for a long time, sometimes it's nice to just take a blitz and just say, I'm going to very quickly try to get like 1 or 2 words for each of these, or kind of rank them as to what's the most crucial. We're just trying to review. You're trying to then take in a little bit and formulate where you're at in the moment. Take a little snapshot of where you're at. Do a little bit of review.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's okay if you feel like you have not organized up to this point. Yeah, I mean, everyone is different, and I've done different things in the past. So you might find what you did as an undergrad is different from what you're doing now, and that's normal. Or what you did last semester is not working for you anymore, and it's like the reality of it. Yeah. So if you are interested in citation software, there are some. I have a link in the slides. I'll send the slides out to the workshop page where you can look at recordings. We do offer just 2 here, the Zotero and the EndNote online. There are other softwares as well, and often I find YouTube help to be my best friend, right? Like a tutorial on whatever I'm interested in. YouTube is great that way. So those are kind of some tools. That's what we've been talking about, the steps and the tools. It's a like fire hose of information. So I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but please do feel free to put any questions. I'll pause and address anything that comes in. The next section is to talk about literature and where to search, so the actual searching. And there's obviously a lot, and so this should come into your planning at the beginning as to what databases you're going to use or what search options you're going to look at. I will say a note here. There's of course Google Scholar as well. The benefit for using the AOK library is just that you have more access to the full text of everything. Google Scholar can be helpful for citations. It doesn't always have the full text. So if you find something on Google Scholar, you can always copy and paste the title and the author and throw it into the library database to get the full text if you're not finding the full text online. Just something to be aware of. So there's the main search, which is the AOK1 search. That's what you see on the main page as you visit the library website, library.umbc.edu. Put that in the chat. That really combines most of our databases. We have over 400 databases, and that is a big, giant combined search. You're going to find articles from the STEM fields, social sciences, humanities, the arts, all in one big, giant search there. And then we have specific database searching. You can do individual databases. We have research guides that can kind of give you a map of what databases might be helpful for your subject area. And then beyond the library holdings, there's always interlibrary loan. And then if you're working on a dissertation or thesis, it can be really helpful to look at our dissertation and thesis database. So I will mention a little bit of each of these. If there's a database you're interested in, feel free to put it in the chat and I can talk about that. So when you're doing a search, you just type in your search topic in the main screen, and then it opens up to our discovery layer that might look familiar if you've done any searching. And the default is everything. It's going to be most of our databases. It's going to be a mix of physically what's in the building, like physical books, and then our ebook, online digital materials as well. That's kind of the default. You can then narrow your search by clicking on some of the options here, like you can select books only or articles only. Down here, you can select peer-reviewed journals, for example, or limit by publication date. So you can be a little more specific in your search. I do always recommend signing in. So you'll get a little yellow banner that pops up. You definitely want to sign in because that will get you access to the full text. So same issue on like Google Scholar. Often these databases have a paywall, and the UMBC campus is paying for them, right? It's part of your tuition. So make sure that you're signing in to get access to the full text. If you're doing a lot of book reading, so depending on your, like a lot of humanities folks, English, history, languages, you might need to request books from other campuses, and you can do that if you've signed in. And of course, I mentioned there's ways to refine your search. So several different things. You can click on just online items or physical items if you want physical books or archive material. Peer-reviewed journals would be the academic journals. You can limit by publication date, subject area. There's so many ways to limit. The default will be any physical materials in the USM system. So it will also include books from other University of Maryland campuses, such as College Park, Bowie, Towson, Salisbury, etc. And you can request that a hold be placed and they be shipped to UMBC to pick up. So that's a nice option. If you want to expand beyond USMAI, you would select that at the very top, and that would open up libraries beyond Maryland. And so that would be really a request through interlibrary loan, which goes beyond the University of Maryland system. So that is an option to you as well if you select that. I always recommend saving also. So there's some nice features. On the top right of the screen, there is the sign in. Sorry, let's see if I can pull that up. Let's do a search here. Here's my topic: urban gardening, composting. I'd always want to sign in, so that's really important. It's your UMBC sign in. And then up at the top, you can see I'm logged in. So from here, you have a few options. If I select any article or anything here in the list, there's this toolbar where I can email the citation to myself. I can grab the permanent link. I highly recommend that link. The link on the top will break. So if you've ever tried to save a link from the top and you've gone back to it, there's an error message and you're not able to access it. So grab the permanent link. That's because we're using subscription databases. It's like your private Netflix account, right? To all the academic journals. So use the permanent link, and then you can also use the citation feature depending on, you know, what citation you're using. Copy that and use that as well. I recommend downloading whatever you find. So there's usually an option to download the PDF. Or you'll see an option to view online. It will say full text availability. Again, this is where sometimes Google Scholar does not give you the full text. If you're on campus, however, Google Scholar will pick up on that and it will actually use the IP address that's the campus address that does allow it to go in and use the UMBC articles from the library. So if you're finding that you're using a lot more full text when you're on campus and you're getting booted off if you're off campus, it matters because the subscriptions work through the physical UMBC location. If you're off campus, that's why you always want to sign in so that you can get full access wherever you are. So if I'm at my house, I always make sure I'm signed in. I always make sure I'm signed in even if I'm on campus because I get more access that way. So just make sure you sign in. So here's my full text. I can download it. I can get the PDF of it. If you're doing research for like a paper, long term, I would download all the articles and put them in a folder for yourself and just make it easy. You can always go back for the full text. That's what I recommend. You could even do cloud storage, like put them in a Google folder. That's fine. Whatever works for you. Once you graduate and leave UMBC, you will not get the full text access to the databases if you're off campus. So you won't be able to sign in remotely. UMBC is a public university, so anyone who's on campus will get access. But if you're at home, you won't get the same access once you graduate. So you can email it, you can save the permalink, the citation, you can download the PDF. There's also a couple other ways. At the top of the screen, there is a QR code. If you save that or use that, that will save your entire search. So all 4,000 results, it will save exactly what I searched. The thumbtack icon will allow you to select anything and add it to your folders. So if you select a couple of these, you can add that to your folders. You can select, this will take you to your folders and you can see your saved searches. You can add to it. You can add a label. You can have a folder system that way for your searching if that's of interest to you. You do want to remember to select whatever you want to save. So once it's selected, then you can click on the thumbtack and save. So you can add to any folders that way. If you have a specific journal, let's say that your professor has said, hey, your research fits really well with the Journal of Popular Media Studies, and you have a very specific title, then you might honestly want to just go to that journal, do a search, and at the top it will show up as a journal search, and just type in the exact title and just search that journal. So Nature. There's a journal called Nature. It's a really important journal for the sciences. So you can view the journal contents, you can look at what's available. You can search within the journal. So if you have the name of a specific article you're looking for, you could type that in. And honestly, nature comes in a lot of our databases. So we have it through a lot of them. You can click on any of them and you should be able to get access. You can search by volume or issue. It gives you all the years that we have through that database. So that's our journal search. And then our database search is what it sounds like. It would be searching an individual database. So if you have a particular subject area that you're interested in, we could do a search for a database. And you can see we have 455 databases. So they're all listed here alphabetically. You can search that way, or you can type in, say, I'm looking for a language database. And we have 33 databases where language is mentioned somewhere. And that makes sense. The first one, top result, is linguistics and language behavior. So that makes sense. That would be a great database for me to search. This takes me out of the main search, which is the big, giant, everything together search. And now I'm just searching a very specific language-focused database. So there's pros and cons to this. It's going to be a lot more narrow of a search, but it will be just highlighting scholarship from the field of language studies. You can do that with psychology. You could do that with public policy. So if we put in like public policy, for example, these are the databases related to public policy: environmental studies and policy, public affairs. Some of these are like news sites, so that might not be as helpful to you. But you can kind of see what we have related to that topic. Let's see, aging studies, psych info, social index, social services abstracts, Medline. These are all related to gerontology and aging. The other thing you can do is use the research guides. So if you're on the library homepage or anywhere, the research help tab and research guides. This can be really helpful if you don't know what databases are in your subject area and you're not sure where to go. So you can always take a look. Let's do the public policy, public health, or let's do public policy. And right away, it's going to recommend some articles, databases. And public policy is super interdisciplinary. So it's even broken down in this case. That's not always the case. That's kind of nice. You can see databases that focus on these different areas: health and medicine, education, economics. Then you can just search in that specific database. ERIC is a database that is focused on education. So again, that's a way to get a little more narrow. Research help, research guides. There's one on aging studies as well. So again, social index, psych info, social services. These are some major article databases. So any grad student, I do recommend making an interlibrary loan account. This is for anyone, faculty, grads, undergrads. But it can be helpful if you are finding that you need to go a little more broad with your research beyond just the USM system. And sometimes it may be an article that we have, like you might do a search. Let me see if I can actually show this. So there might be, let's see. So if I have a very narrow topic, I'm looking very specifically at something. There sometimes might be an article that I don't get the full text for. Let me see if I can show an example of that. These all, we have the full text for all these. Let's see. So I could show an example here. Let me go a little further in the search. The relevancy ranking usually gives us the articles we have access to at the top. So if there's an article we didn't have access to, it would just say, look at accessibility options. And it will give you the option to request their interlibrary loan. So if you already have your interlibrary loan account set up, it's an easy click. I don't have an example here, I'm sorry. Oh, results beyond USMAI. Let's try this. This might do it. So interlibrary loan, here we go. So this is a book, no online access. If I was to request this book through interlibrary loan, it shows that there's no UMBC option. I don't see UMBC listed here. So it says how to get it, and it says interlibrary loan book request. So I could select that, and it would go through the interlibrary loan system. The first time you make an account, you'll be asked to put in your information, your email, your address. You could put in the UMBC address, that's fine. This is my profile, my name, my address, my email address, etc. So the first time you use interlibrary loan, you'll have to set that up and then never again. That will just be your account forever. Well, until you graduate. The 14-digit ID number is something you've probably never had to use ever before, but it is on your ID card. There's a 14-digit number above the barcode in the bottom right of your ID, and that is officially your library card number, but no one ever uses it, obviously. But you do need it for interlibrary loan. That would be the one time that you need it. And then once you have an account, it's pretty easy. Then you can make a request. You can fill out like physical requests that way. Articles are really easy. They come as like a PDF scan. I've had article interlibrary loan come through in and out, like a couple hours. I can make a request at the beginning of the day, and then by the end of the day, I have the article. So it can be really helpful. If you don't have full text for something, I highly recommend putting in an interlibrary loan request for it. And that would be how it would look. And it's the same thing, this is a book, but same thing for like an article. It would just say interlibrary loan to get the full text. Books take a longer time. They have to be shipped from another library. Articles are easy. It's a PDF scan. They come in very quickly, usually. So I mentioned the research guides. There's a direct link here. You can use the slides and go directly to the research guides and use those resources. Again, that's going to give you some of the top databases in your subject area. There's also a specific dissertation and theses database. This can be nice to see what others have written on the topic. So again, it's going to look like this, but you'd be searching for your topic online. You can select publication date if you want to or not, but there's usually a lot, so you might want to limit it or narrow it by adding keywords or being a little more specific in your scope. So yeah, this one actually talks about urban gardening in Maryland. That's kind of fun. This is about high school students. This is about Sweden. So you can kind of go through and say, oh, maybe actually I really do want like, and the United States. So reading through the titles might help you narrow and kind of decide how you want to search. Yeah. And I'm mindful of time. So I would love to leave some time for questions, and then I'll also just go over ways to get assistance moving forward. So again, if you have the next 5-10 minutes, if you have any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat or share any questions. There's a lot of ways to get assistance from here on out. So there's a lot of information in the slides. I'll share out the recording as well. But just a heads up, for research support, we have an online chat. We have an option to make a research appointment with a subject librarian. You can always ask at the desk if you're in the library in person. And then we have a number of future workshops as well that we welcome anyone to attend. If you know that you can't come at that specific time, it's only offered one time in the semester, I still recommend signing up on MyUMBC, because anyone who is signed up will still get a recording of the workshop and any slides from that workshop. So again, the chat, you may have seen it before. It pops up on the screen if you're on the library page, either a yellow bar on the side or a red little box. There's a real librarian helping. So later today, I'll be in chat. So, and my colleagues are in chat right now. So it's not a bot, at least not yet. It's not AI. it's going to be a UMBC librarian who has experience using the UMBC system, who works with students and faculty all the time. And we get a huge range of questions. We get very specific research questions. Can you help me find sources on a specific topic? We get questions about broken links or help finding primary sources, archival sources, kind of just basic questions about navigating to different databases or the library hours. No question is too big or small. And the making a research appointment does allow for a longer period of time, like 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes even an hour. You can meet with your subject librarian. And this can be really helpful if you're working on identifying or narrowing down your topic, thinking about your dissertation proposal or a course assignment. Maybe you have a term paper due and you want some strategies with identifying search terms or some search ideas or some databases to look in, or even just organizing or working on your citations. You can always ask for help, or anything else that might come to mind. Feel free to reach out. Obviously, you can just ask in person at the checkout desk. You can use your ID card to check out materials, and you usually can keep them at least through the end of the year. There's a long loan period. And you can always renew and request anything if they're due. That's why signing in to your account can be helpful. At the top, you can go back to your account and you can renew items that way by looking at your requests. Again, you can also see what you've saved as a favorite or your search history. So those are some nice features as well. And there are several more workshops coming up. So you can look at our events calendar. For example, tomorrow there's a technical writing workshop that's being presented by Brianna, who is the graduate student services librarian and a STEM librarian, and she's wonderful. There's a STEM literature review. So this was the social sciences humanities literature review. There's one for STEM folks, and note for citation management. Again, there's some AI discussions coming up as well. The library's doing an AI symposium. Yeah, and then at the end of the semester, there's some things more on managing and organizing your research. This would be like a literature review 2.0. So different strategies there if you're interested. So you can follow the library, you can look at our events that way. And then just something we are interested in, just getting some more data, is finding out things, ways that you would like help or ways that would be helpful to you. So there is a link. Sorry, I should have added a link. Let me put it in the chat. So tiny URL, UMBC help. Let me add that in the chat. I think that's right. Let me check that. Yeah, that's correct. So if you're online, feel free to follow that. There's only, I think, just 2 quick questions. There's a comments if you have any comments. But what's your role on campus, student, faculty, staff, and what ways you prefer to get help?
The QR code needs to be reactivated.
Okay, that's helpful. I will. Sorry about that. So the link is tinyurl.com. I'll add that to the slides and send them out. Sorry about that.
No problem. Cool. Thank you so much. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've reached the end. Thanks for coming in. Again, feel free to reach out to me specifically, or to, you can always see who your subject librarian is as well. Yeah, thank you for all who joined. I'll send the slides out. I'll send the recording as well. Thanks for coming. Have a great afternoon.